Amaka's heart raced as she looked around the empty schoolyard. Her legs dangled from the edge of the playground's rusted swing, her school uniform drenched in the deepening indigo glow of the setting sun. It was getting dark out and she was the only one left at school. The laughter and chatter of her classmates had long faded, replaced by the eerie silence of an empty schoolyard. She played with her fingers as she looked around fearfully. She clutched her worn backpack tightly, her heart pounding with a growing sense of dread. Where are they? The gate creaked ominously in the distance and Amaka jumped, her breath quickening. She had been forgotten by her parents. The day had started normally enough. Her mother, Ifeoma, had been preoccupied with her business, and her father, Jaide, had left for work in a rush. Amaka had kissed her parents goodbye as usual, not realizing that they were both too distracted to remember her promise to stay late for an art project. As the sun set and the other children were picked up one by one, Amaka finished her painting. But when she went to the school gate, her parents were nowhere in sight. She waited for what felt like hours, but still, no one came. The school grounds were eerily quiet now, every sound magnified in the stillness of the night. Amaka tried to stay calm, but her mind was already conjuring up images about getting kidnapped, or worse, killed. How could they have forgotten to pick her up, she asked herself, and when she could not come up with any reason, she began to cry. Her parents were always busy, too busy for her. Meanwhile, at home, the phone rang incessantly on the kitchen counter, but neither Ifeoma nor Jaide was there to answer. Ifeoma had left her shop in the market early, hoping to catch a ride with a neighbour, and Jaide was still stuck in traffic, his mind occupied with work rather than the daughter he had forgotten to pick up. Now, sitting alone in the dark, Amaka's earlier excitement about the school's cultural day seemed like a distant memory. She had stayed late, eager to finish her painting of a traditional Igbo scene for the competition. The other children had left hours ago, their parents' cars pulling up one by one until only the echo of the gatekeeper's footsteps remained. Why haven't they come yet? She whispered to herself, feeling the first prickle of tears in her eyes. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since lunchtime. She glanced at her wristwatch. It was almost 7 p.m. Just then, a shadow stretched across the playground, causing Amaka to stiffen. She turned to see an unfamiliar figure approaching, a tall man with a weathered face and a limp in his walk. He was the gateman, Mr. Garuba, a man who rarely spoke and was often seen sweeping the school compound with a rusty broom. "Pikin, why you still day here?" Mr. Garuba's voice was gruff, but there was a softness in his gaze as he noticed Amaka's tear-streaked face. "They haven't come to pick me up," she replied, her voice trembling. Mr. Garuba frowned, glancing up at the night sky. "This time don't pass well, but no worry, dem go soon show." He crouched down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Make I lock gate now. He better make you day here inside school than outside." Amaka nodded, her grip tightening on her bag. She didn't want to be alone, but she also didn't want to seem like a baby. "Okay, Mr. Garuba." Amaka nodded, her small feet dragging as she followed the old man towards the school's entrance. "Are you hungry?" Mr. Garuba asked after a while, breaking the silence. They were inside the school now, and Amaka felt strangely safer. Amaka nodded shyly, her stomach growling again as if on cue. The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small loaf of bread. "Nah, only this I get, but you fit manage, "Thank you, sir," Amaka whispered, tearing off a piece of the bread and nibbling on it slowly. The bread was stale, but she was too hungry to care. "You know Lagos no be place for small pickin' 2 day alone," he said, his tone serious now. "You must always be careful." Amaka nodded, but she was focused on the bread. She was so hungry. Wait here, I'll go and bring water for you, he said to her before dashing out of the school, leaving her alone. Amaka watched him go, the darkness swallowing him up as he disappeared around the corner. She was alone again, the silence of the night pressing in on her from all sides. The empty school was suddenly too big and empty for her. Amaka shivered. She tried to distract herself, humming a song her mother used to sing to her at bedtime. But the sound of her own voice only made the emptiness around her feel more oppressive. Her thoughts spiraled, imagining all the terrible things that could happen in the dark. Ghosts, monsters, kidnappers. She shuddered, hugging her knees to her chest. But there was no such thing as ghosts. Amaka whispered to herself. It was something her mother always told her, and everyone knew that parents were always right. Right? A sudden noise snapped her out of her thoughts. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the direction of the school's main building. Amaka froze, her breath catching in her throat. Mr. Garuba, she thought, though something told her it wasn't him. The footsteps grew louder, closer, echoing through the empty corridors. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest as she strained her ears, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. She could hear the blood rushing in her ears, drowning out all other noises. Suddenly a figure emerged from the shadows just beyond the pool of light cast by the dim security lamp. It was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a menacing presence that made Amaka's blood run cold. He was dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket, but there was something in his posture that screamed danger. He was not Mr. Garuba. Cold fear ran through Amaka. Amaka's first instinct was to run, but her legs felt like they were glued to the ground. She could only stare as the man approached, his steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "Hey there, little one." The man's voice was low and gravelly, sending chills down Amaka's spine. He stopped a few feet away, towering over her. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Amaka's mouth went dry. She tried to speak, to call for help, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of Mr. Garuba. But the schoolyard was empty. The reality of her situation hit her like a punch to the gut. She was alone, truly alone. Maybe Mr. Garuba had sent him, but it didn't seem very likely. The man smiled at her, showing her his yellow teeth. "Don't bother looking for that old fool. He's not coming to save you." Amaka's heart sank. What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice barely more than a whisper. The man's smile widened, though there was nothing friendly about it. "Let's just say, he won't be bothering us anymore. Them no born and well." He took a step closer and Amaka could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. A knife. Fear, unlike anything she'd ever known, gripped her, squeezing the air from her lungs. She felt a warm wetness spread between her legs as the terror overwhelmed her, her body betraying her in the worst possible way. She had peed on herself. Once again, Amaka thought about her parents. Where were they?
The man tilted his head, as if considering her plea. "Hurt you?" he echoed, his tone mockingly gentle. "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you, NWA. Not yet, anyway." Amaka's skin crawled as the man called her NWA. She was just a child, not an NWA. NWA was meant for grown-up women, not her. Jesus, she was only 13. Amaka's mind raced, desperate to find a way out. She knew she couldn't stay there, waiting for whatever horrible thing this man had planned. She had to move, had to get away, but how? As if sensing her thoughts, the man suddenly lunged forward, grabbing her by the arm with a vice-like grip. "Where do you think you're going?" he hissed, pulling her close. His breath was hot and foul against her cheek, and the smell of sweat and something rotten filled her nostrils. Amaka let out a strangled cry, struggling against his hold, but he was too strong. "Let me go. Please, let me go," she sobbed, trying to wriggle free.
Amaka's heart felt like it was going to explode out of her chest. She rounded a corner, her shoes slipping on the gravel, but she managed to stay on her feet. She could see the faint outline of the school's back gate, up ahead, the one that led to the staff quarters. If I can just get there, she thought desperately, pushing herself to run faster, but the man was faster. He was gaining on her and she knew she couldn't outrun him. Panic clawed at her throat as she realized she was running out of time, out of options. And then she saw it, a small gap in the fence, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. It was her only chance. Without hesitation, she dove for it, her body scraping against the rough metal as she wriggled through. The man reached out, his fingers grazing her ankle, but she kicked out, her shoe connecting with his hand. He cursed loudly, but Amaka didn't stop. She scrambled to her feet on the other side of the fence, her heart pounding in her ears, and took off running again. She didn't know how far she ran, or how long. All she knew was that she had to keep going, had to stay ahead of the man who wanted to do something terrible to her. The world around her blurred into a dark, nightmarish landscape. So this was what being in a horror movie felt like? Amaka wondered as she ran. She thought about Mr. Garuba, who was kind to her, and wished he was okay. Finally, her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the ground, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. She was safe for now. She was hiding behind the Suya man's stall a few miles away from her school. She hid under the bench and closed her eyes. Amaka curled up on the cold, hard ground, her body shaking with sobs. She had never been so scared in her life, and she knew she would never forget this night. Thankfully, the man was nowhere to be found. Amaka's eyelids felt heavy, like they had stones on them, as she lay curled up under the Suya man's stall. The cold, hard ground beneath her wasn't comfortable at all. But after running and hiding for what seemed like forever, she was too tired to care. Her small body still shook with the leftover fear from the night, her mind replaying the terrifying moment with that man. She still had no idea what had happened to him, and poor Mr. Garuba. The sounds of Lagos waking up, roosters crowing, car horns blaring, people talking, started to fill the air. Amaka stirred, her senses slowly coming back to life. Her muscles were aching, but the fear that had held her so tightly last night was beginning to loosen. She blinked, trying to figure out where she was, and realized she wasn't in the scary darkness anymore. Dawn was breaking, and the first light of the day was all around her. Amaka visibly relaxed once she started seeing people going about their day. Then she began to hear voices, not too far from where she hid. They were frantic and urgent. For a moment, she stayed still, wondering if she was dreaming. The voices she heard were muffled but got clearer with each passing second. Where could she be? She's just a child. A woman's voice, thick with worry, cut through the morning calm. Ifeoma, we go find her. Another voice, deeper and filled with determination, replied. She can't have gone too far. The guard said he last saw her running in this direction away from the school. Amaka's heart skipped a beat. She knew those voices, the voices of her parents. With a mix of relief and disbelief, she slowly pushed herself up on her elbows and peeked out from under the stall. The sight that greeted her made her heart swell. Her parents, Ifeoma and Jide, were just a few feet away, their faces full of panic and guilt. Ifeoma's eyes were red and puffy, like she had been crying all night, and Jide looked worn out, his usually neat appearance now rough, They were talking to the Suya man, who pointed toward the stall where Amaka was hiding. She dey here last night, the Suya man said, shaking his head. Small peekin, she dey look scared, but I thought she was okay. I was hurrying to go home. As soon as Ifeoma heard this, she turned sharply, her eyes landing on the stall. Amaka! She cried, rushing toward her daughter. Amaka crawled out from her hiding place, her legs shaky as she stood up. Before she could fully understand what was happening, her mother's arms were around her, the familiar scent of her perfume filling her nose. Oh, my baby, Ifeoma sobbed, holding Amaka tight. I'm so sorry, my darling. I'm so sorry. Jide quickly joined them, wrapping his strong arms around both Ifeoma and Amaka. Thank God, Amaka, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. I was so scared that you were kidnapped. Amaka, still in shock from the night's events, clung to her parents. The fear that had consumed her was now replaced by a rush of relief. She could feel her mother's heart beating fast against her chest and the warmth of her father's embrace. It was over. She was safe. Where were you? Amaka's voice was small, almost lost in her parents' embrace. Why didn't you come to pick me up? Ifeoma pulled back a little, just enough to cup Amaka's face in her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked into her daughter's eyes. I'm so sorry we forgot. I got held up at the market for longer than I had bargained, and your father was supposed to pick you. Jide nodded, his expression filled with regret. It was my fault. I should have been here, but He lowered his eyes, his voice filled with emotion. We were careless, Amaka, with our own child. Only God knows the horrors you must have seen, and sleeping under a bench in this cold. A tear dropped from her father's eyes as he looked her over. Amaka could see the pain in their eyes, the genuine remorse. She could feel it in the way they held her, in the trembling of her mother's hands as she stroked her hair. But I was so scared, she whispered, her voice breaking. A man. He tried to. Her words faltered, unable to finish the thought. Jide's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he pulled Amaka even closer. I'll make sure that man pays for what he did. You're safe now, Amaka. No one will ever touch you again. Ifeoma kissed the top of Amaka's head, her tears falling onto her daughter's hair. We won't let anything like this happen again. We promise, Amaka. You mean the world to us. We were careless, Amaka, with our own child. Only God knows the kind of danger you were in last night, Jide said, his voice trembling. We'll never let this happen again, Ifeoma promised, holding her close. We love you so much. Let's go home, her father said gently, lifting Amaka into his arms as if she weighed nothing. You're exhausted. Amaka nodded, too tired to speak. And from that day on, they were never careless with Amaka again.
If you like this story, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Until next time.